I want you to try and do that. Do the first two. So say we decided to look at what the women think. So I've done this to give you an example of one-tailed as well, so you can see where the differences are. So in New Zealand, the average age for women to marry for the first time is currently 27. And is the average ideal age of marriage less than 27 for female students? Okay, so the null hypothesis is the mean ideal age is equal to, actually we probably should say or greater than 27. Now, null hypotheses always have equal in there somewhere. It's also another rule about null hypotheses. So if you find one that doesn't have an equal in it, that's not going to be the null hypothesis. It can be equal to or greater than, equal to or less than, or just equal to, but it has to have equal in there. And the alternative hypothesis is that the mean ideal age to marry is less than 27. In fact, generally, I would write the alternative hypothesis first. I think most people do that because alternative hypothesis is what you're actually trying to find out, and the null hypothesis is nothing. So I would normally go, okay, the alternative hypothesis is that the mean ideal age to marry is less than 27, and the null hypothesis is that it isn't. And so you write whatever it would mean if it isn't to be the null hypothesis. We'll choose alpha equals 0.05. We collected the data, we found 110 female students, what they thought the ideal age was to marry. Mean was 25.79, so we've got 25.79, 27. Is that going to be a big enough gap? Let's have a look at the next page, which gives us the data. And so we've got there our mean, we've got our standard error. And in fact, what I've done here is I've just taken that minus that, and still giving this to you. Oh yeah, this is in your notes. There's a printed out, a worksheet, PDF on how to do this. So step by step on doing this, and it also gives the second one. So all of this stuff is in the notes there. So I've done the sums here. I get a t-value of negative 5.49. Don't worry about the fact that sometimes it's negative and sometimes it's positive. I'm not particularly picky about that because I think the important thing is to think about the meaning, and when you do that, it's not quite as vital. But strictly speaking, that should have been a minus, but if you do that, the p-value doesn't work. So that's why I didn't make it a minus. Okay, so our p-value was again 0. So p equals 0. I've already got that. So our decision, what do? Do we accept the alternative hypothesis? No. That was something I said yesterday. We never accept any hypothesis. We either reject the null or we don't reject the null. Those are the only two things that you're allowed to do. Okay, so are we going to reject the null or not reject the null? Hands up if you think reject. Yes, you're right. So we will reject H0, and our conclusion is, I can't be bothered writing this, so I'll just copy out what I've got here. So we can say that the average ideal age to marry for female students is less than the actual average age that women do marry in New Zealand. So there's the complete picture. There's always this tension between rigour and being understandable. When I talk about something being rigorous, that means that absolutely strictly that is correct. And so someone who is really expert on statistics would say, yes, that's the right thing to say. But often if you say something in a completely rigorous way, it's almost meaningless to anybody else who isn't a statistician. So you always need to be able to say it in another way that is more meaningful. So this one here, our decision is that we reject the null hypothesis. Our conclusion is that we can say that the average ideal age to marry for female students, so this is supposedly more easy to understand, or in even shorter form you'd say, well, the girls tended to have an average age that they thought you should get married was less than the actual average age. So there's always levels of how you explain things. And I need you to be able to do the rigorous stuff and to be able to do the meaning. It's really important.